how did we get here? And, you know, I'm going to I think the best way to explain that is explain my own journey. When I was in high school, I was a very rebellious teenager. I was not listening to my parents, my teachers, my authority figures, my coaches. Who I was listening to was the guy in my headphones. Since 1992, I've been a diehard Tupac Shakur fan, ever since the movie Juice came out. And what I loved about his music was to me, it represented this, I don't care about this, I don't care about that attitude. And I identified with that at the time. But as far as being a high school student, I was an average student. I finished high school with an 85 average overall. I come from a long line of librarians, English teachers, so I was always read to as a child. I could read well, speak well. So even though I didn't study a lot or put in any effort, I was able to get into Hobart and William Smith colleges in Geneva, New York. And I lucked into a first-year seminar called The Culture of Respect. And I remember I was 5 weeks into the semester, and I went back to my dorm room, and I was listening to the same Tupac Shakur songs and the same Tupac Shakur lyrics I had been listening to for years, but I started hearing something different. Instead of hearing a young man rebelling for the sake of rebelling, I started hearing a young man talk about growing up in poverty, with a mother who was hooked on crack, with a father who was incarcerated, with experiencing racism at every corner, with the only kind of prosperity he saw through criminality and drug sales. It was an epiphany, quite frankly. It made me realize the world is so much bigger than just myself and what I know. So I decided that I was going to spend the next 4 years participating in this Culture of Respect program. The course was run in a program called Peer Education for Human Relations. And the Culture of Respect is what made it such a profound learning experience for me. It's based on experiential learning. What we'd always say is the students were the textbooks for the class. We learned through sharing our own lived experiences with systems of oppression. So you can imagine, instead of studying these concepts in a textbook or reading statistics about hate crimes or things, I was sitting down across from my peers and hearing things like, one thing I want you to know about how racism has affected me as a black man is. One thing I want you to know about how heterosexism has affected me as a transgender person is. It just taught me things about humanity that I was oblivious to previously. So from there, I knew I wanted to commit my life to this work. It is absolutely not hyperbole to say it changed my life. I went off to Carnegie Mellon University for graduate school on a full teaching fellowship in their rhetoric department. And I was teaching rhetoric courses, right, sort of first year writing seminar. But what I brought to the classroom were culture of respect activities and topics. And the students were buzzing about it. And then colleagues at the university were hearing students talking. And then people would come up to me and say, hey, we would love for, my wife works for the Pittsburgh Public Library System. They would love for a diversity trainer to come out and host a workshop for their staff. Or my girlfriend's a teacher at the Manchester Youth Development Academy, and they'd love for someone to come out and do something for their children. And that's when I started my work as a professional diversity trainer and storyteller in 2001 in Pittsburgh. And from there, I knew, this is it. This is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. So I wanted to become a director or a coordinator of multicultural affairs at a college or university. I landed at Drexel University in Philadelphia, which is where I met Tisha. I was hired as their first ever coordinator of multicultural programs. And as my dad said to me, old African proverb right before I started the job, there is no path until you make it. And I knew the most productive path that I could offer to promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, anti-oppression efforts at Drexel was the culture of respect. So as a single person with no street cred, no teaching colleagues, I pitched this course and was approved to teach it. There were 29 students in the first offering. And to say those students took into the course and believed in it would be an understatement. The course went on to be offered 11 consecutive terms. It became a movement at the university. I trained over 50 students to become peer teachers for the course, what we call teaching colleagues. And by the end, there were 100 students who would participate per term, 80 participants and 20 student facilitators. I then got married, and it was off to Union College in Schenectady, New York, where I'm still 14 years later, the director of academic opportunity programs and higher education opportunity programs. I brought the culture of respect to Union. Again, students there embracing it and loving it. I taught a version of what I call Cultural Respect Light at SUNY Schenectady, where I taught for a decade from 2010 to 2020. And then a pandemic arrived, and I was at home working remote. And in the summer of 2020, and I say this as a preface to say, this shirt that I'm wearing right now and this current iteration of the Cultural Respect and this fall course that we're able to offer coming up, where did that come from? What I think is most special about it is the founder of this was not my idea. It wasn't. In the summer of 2020, I had several of those teaching colleagues who I had trained at Drexel University reach out to me separately, each on their own accord, but each with the same question, which was, had you thought about bringing the culture of respect back to new audiences and on a virtual platform and offering it to folks outside of higher ed? And what was behind their ask were a few things. One, we were just coming off of the murder of George Floyd in May. We had a presidency that had the United States as divided between red and blue as I've ever seen in my lifetime. We were arguing on everything from the size and scope of the welfare state to immigration to critical race theory, transgender rights, gun control, etc. So much antagonism. And these folks were telling me the world needs this again, and it needs it on a bigger scale. So they lit a fire under my butt, and I started the process of getting the band back together again.